I want to welcome everybody to this webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about library signage. My name is Shellie Zeigler, and I'm one of the library consultants here at the Mississippi Library Commission. I did call this webinar the Happy Library because I believe that having good signage does make the library a happier place. And because I do love dogs, I included this very happy picture of this lovely dog. It is not my dog, but there you go. So what we'll be talking about today is why signage matters, what is bad signage, and what makes good signage, and how to start looking critically at your own signage. And that can be really hard because like our patrons, it's easy for us to overlook our signage and actually see the condition and the message that our signage is actually conveying, because we're looking at it every day and we're going to overlook it because it's something that we're seeing every day, in and out, in and out. So why is signage so important? This is the million-dollar question. Why are we even talking about this topic? That might be something you're asking yourself. Why are you even here at this webinar? Well, because signage is a major touch point. And you might have heard of the phrase touch point from my colleague, Lacey. She mentions talking about touch points in her customer service webinar and presentation. But a touch point is a point of contact or interaction between a business and its customers or consumers. While a library is a type of business, we are also a service. So touch points are experiences that your customers or patrons, you can use either terminology, I know, that will affect your patrons as they go about using your services. And ideally, we want all of the touch points to reflect and reinforce the services that we are offering. Some other examples of touch points at your library are, there's numerous examples, but some that I want to talk about are your websites, your social media posts, even your parking lot. How your parking lot looks is a major touch point. Is there a lot of trash in it? Are there available spots? Is it easy to park in? Your restrooms, the condition of your restrooms. Do you have restrooms available? Which you should. But all of these are the interactions that your patrons are going to have as they use your library services. And they have a lot to do with the experiences that your patrons are going to remember. And they may never ever talk to a human being while they're at your library, but they're going to remember these touch points. So that's why we're talking about signage, because it is a major touch point. So we're going to talk about the various types of signage. So signage will usually have one of these three messages on it. It will either be a policy. I see a lot of no food or drink policies, which that tends to be going away, which I'm happy to see, because we're letting people be adults and take care of themselves. But I do see a lot of no food or drink directional policies. That's very important, especially for restrooms. Letting people know how to find things, or how to find maybe meeting rooms, for example. And then informational policies. That could be about programs or things that are going on in your community. So typically signage will fall into one of these three categories. So let's talk about negative or ineffective signage. And this guy here does not like these handwritten policies, or signage, not policies. Handwritten signage. If you're going to take the time to put up a sign, you should take the time to at least type it out on your computer. A quick handwritten sign, unless there is a major emergency, they just look sloppy and unprofessional. Are there too many words on the sign? Because patrons usually don't pay a lot of attention to signs unless it's something that they need. So if there are too many words on a sign, people aren't going to pay a lot of attention to it. So make it just the short and sweet words that people need. Are there too many colors? That's going to be hard to read, one, and it's also going to be difficult to see from afar, and it's just not professional. Is there visible tape? That is a big one. Take the time to, if you are gonna tape it onto something, put the tape on the back so there's not visible tape, because that just also looks unprofessional. And here's a big one, using fancy fonts. I see this a lot. A lot of people do like to use fancy fonts, thinking that it's going to look really cool and neat. And what it does, it just makes it hard to read. So stick with some nice fonts that are easy to read and that gets your message across. So let's go and talk about Comic Sans font and Papyrus. These are two fonts that you really should stay away from. Maybe if you're going to put up a sign in the children's department, that's the only place I can think of that you might use those. The reason being is because they just look childlike, and especially if you have a serious message, they're going to take away from the meaning of your message. Repetitive signs. I have seen this in libraries and I've seen it online. They are not professional and they can be condescending. You don't have to put up a lot of signs saying the same thing. One or two is enough in the correct areas. And be sure to look at your grammar. Is your grammar correct? Because the first thing that will take away from your message is having bad grammar. And is your sign passive aggressive? We'll talk more about that in another slide. That is also something to very much stay away from. And all caps. I think a lot of people are learning that this is just bad, especially when you're writing an email. Most people know to avoid all caps. So also when you're writing a sign, avoid all caps, because like an email, it makes it look like you are yelling. So just avoid it. So passive aggressive signs. What am I talking about? Passive aggressiveness is when you are expressing negative feelings indirectly. So instead of just being direct with your feelings, you're finding a way to say it in sometimes what people think is a funny, backwards way. It just comes across as being just kind of just crappy, to be honest with you. So avoid ending your negative signs with things like where you say do not do this, or please do not do this. And then you say, oh, have a nice day, and we appreciate you. Patrons can read that, that you're being very insincere. So for example, I have this one sign up here that says, genealogy materials are reference only and are not to be checked out. So don't even ask. And it's a genealogy area is monitored with a security camera. So smile. While that some people think that's being funny and cute, it's passive aggressive. And apparently someone in the second sign, someone must have brought spaghetti into this library. So they have a clip art, which I'm not a huge fan of. They must have brought spaghetti into the library. So they've used clip art and with the big no sign. So they said, seriously, spaghetti in the library? What were you thinking? That is using a sign to address a patron problem, which I'm also going to talk about in a minute. But that is passive aggressiveness, and it's going to be taken as such, and it's just not a way to use your signage. So avoid that at all costs. And let's talk about fonts. So I talked about Comic Sans and Papyrus, but you'll see here that you have the same message, and it obviously conveys a different message using two different fonts there. So just be conscious of the font that you use. And in this second sign, you can tell that by using a certain font, it will take away from, while you have a big warning sign, if you use a cute little font, it doesn't really seem that serious. So just be conscious of the font that you use. All right, and then here, this first sign, please turn off your cell phone. And they have two colors, and they have the big X, and then they have all caps. Then they have in little, and they have in it's very small. It says, "Thank you for your cooperation." And then it says library director. So we got lots of bad things going on here. Different colors, the small font, all caps. So it's passive aggressive. And you're yelling at the patrons, and you've got the different colors. It's just wrong all the way around. There's a much better way to convey this message. And then in the second one, I have a picture of I guess it's the other side of a circulation desk. Maybe not. I'm not really sure, but you can't tell because it's hard to read. But there is a sign that says, "Please read important information." Well, and it's two different colors. Bad. But you wouldn't be able to read that because the desk is so cluttered. No one's going to read any of the information that's at this desk. So one, you got to clean it up, and you've got to make your signage stand out a little bit more. So let's talk about positive or effective signage. So positive and effective signage, and this lady here is very excited about it, uses if you have a library logo or branding, you would put that on it. You would use proper grammar. You would make it easy to read, and that would be by using a good font. It would not be extraneous, and I mean extraneous in your wording, and also in the number of signs. Maybe you wouldn't put 5 signs up in your library saying the same things. It would be consistent in your color branding. I know here at the Library Commission, we have like a color palette. You might have one for your library system. Also, you might consider using a template for all your signage, and that would have consistency throughout. One thing I have noticed, and if you have a lot of photo frames at your house, and you might have like a wall of a bunch of your photos, if you buy the same frame, like let's just say black frames, for example, all of your photos will stand out more if you have the same frame. Instead of if you have like, a blue frame and a green frame and a black frame and a brown frame. And I'm no interior decorator, but I learned that somewhere. So if you do the same thing with your signage and your template is the same, then your signage, what you're saying on your sign, will stand out more if you do that. So that's just consistency, and that's just a little tip there. And make sure that the message of your signage is polite and courteous, not passive aggressive. And just be direct with your message. Don't be extraneous in your wording. Just say what you got to say. There's no need to say thank you, management, or library director, or anything like that. So let's look at this. Okay, so this first one, it says, don't worry, we'll tidy up. Please allow us to reshelve library materials. Doesn't have a big X, it doesn't have, it's very respectful. It doesn't talk down to anyone. The only thing I don't like about this one is that it uses two different fonts and two different colors. So it's not perfect, but it's better. Now the second one is really bad. It says, yes, we know that you are in library school. Yes, we know that you know Dewey Decimal. Nonetheless, please do not reshelve materials. Leave on any library cart or table when you are finished. I cannot say loud enough that that is passive aggressive with a capital P and A. See the difference? There you go. So earlier we saw that sign about the spaghetti. That was addressing a customer service issue with library signage. So when you go and you do look at your library signage, are you addressing customer service issues with your library signage? Are you using signage to react to patron issues? It is not the best way to handle specific patron issues. Why? Because you're probably only talking to a handful of people, maybe only within one person. And is that the most direct way to get one or a few people to stop doing a behavior? Probably not. And meanwhile, while you have one sign up that's passive aggressive, and you're trying to talk to one person through that sign, you're maybe making the rest of your patrons very upset with that kind of a cruddy little sign. So think of another way to address a customer service issue other than making a passive aggressive sign. Just a thing to think about there. And okay, so it's a signage audit. This is where you can help you and your staff to start looking at your signage with fresh eyes. Because like I said, when we go into our libraries every day, day in, day out, you start not noticing the things that you see every day. When I was working on this webinar, I noticed that I started noticing the signs here at the Library Commission that I've been looking at for 2 or 3 years. And I was like, oh, that should probably be changed. And I've been looking at them forever. But because I was working on what is good signage, I noticed what should be changed. So it's only when it's brought to your attention that you start noticing what you see every day with your eyes. So here is an idea to really start looking at your signage and seeing what your patrons are seeing, because they're not usually coming into your library every day. I mean, you might have some, but I was thinking that if you have multiple branches, that it could be a good idea to consider having different librarians or branch managers do a signage audit of each other's branches. And that could ensure the fresh eyes perspective, and that they could come and look at each sign and decide if that sign should be discarded, moved to a different location even, because it might be in the wrong location, so it might not even apply to the location where it's at, or it should be updated, because signs are not, they're living organisms, yes. So they should always be updated, and then start to create the guidelines that I talked about earlier. Having a standard font, having a standard font size, having a standard color palette. Start using your logo. If you don't have a logo, this is a good time to create a logo. We have a marketing director here that can even help you come up with a logo. And if you want more information about that, just contact me and I will put you in contact with her. Also consider creating that template I talked about so your signage can stay consistent. Just remember those frames I talked about at your house. So when you have like a wall of photos, when they're all in the same frame, the photos magically pop out. I mean, it is like magic. But when you have a bunch of different photo frames, the photos you don't notice them as much. That's just my interior design tip here. So if you've thought maybe these were some good ideas, but you want to do more and you want to go for that extra mile, avoid clip art. It doesn't look good. It looks dated. Doesn't look professional. Use real photos of people. Like here, this happy little group of kids. Look at this little boy. He looks so happy. And you can find real photos that aren't copyrighted in Canva. That's why I said use Canva. And also a great thing to do that you should be doing is promoting diversity and promoting the diversity in your community. And you can find lots of diverse photos in Canva. And this is not a Canva webinar, but you can get a free Canva account. So I just want to say that. And continue to look at your signage. And does your signage say no and don't a lot? Probably does, because a lot of times that's we're trying to convey certain policies. Try to convey that without using those words, because try to convey a more positive way to look at your sign. So maybe instead of saying no food or drink, you could say something like, because that's one that's so popular that I see so much, is please take your food and drink outside, or something of that effect. Or please enjoy your food and drink outside. Just make the library a more welcoming, happy place. And if you like those and you're like, well, Shellie, I want to do even more. Let's go for that gold star and start using the holder frames for your signs. And those can be bought at they're very inexpensive. There's those plastic holder frames. And just putting a sheet of paper that you created, a sign that you created on Canva, and one of those holder signs is so much more professional looking than just taping something up somewhere. And be sure that you look at the eye level, the average eye level that someone would see it on. Don't make it too low or make it too high. One thing also to look at is to avoid mounting your signs on furniture for a couple reasons. One, it doesn't look good. It looks kind of just not so great. And two, depending on how you're putting it on the furniture, when you take it off, it can leave like a gooey gunk. And if you don't properly take that off, that looks kind of gross and just not clean. And when you're doing your signage audit and you're going around your library, be mindful of furniture where old signs might have been placed and there might still be some old tape or glue residue and it was never properly taken off. That's something else I didn't put on that slide, but something to think about. And be mindful of sight lines. And what I mean by that is maybe sit around your library at areas where your patrons will be sitting a lot, like at the computers. Do you have study areas? And look around and see what the areas where they'll be looking at. And those might be good areas to put various signs, but put it at the site level where they'll be seeing it. And that would also help with people actually reading your signage, because I know that's always a problem that we have in libraries. And some final thoughts is, because I know that you have a lot of free time, but is to continuously evaluate your signage. It's easy to just slap signage up and then just forget about it, and 5-6 years go by and then you might come along and be like, oh, that piece of paper is all old and yellow and curling, and that's just not attractive. And that's where you're going to have your signage committee come in, and that's a good idea to have one. And while I talked about earlier about having the fresh eyes, it's good to have people that don't normally come in your library be on that signage committee. So if you don't have multiple branches, like I talked about earlier, let's say you're a one branch system, great. That's a great library system to be. Maybe you partner with another system that's also a one or two branch system, and you guys can share, and you can go to their library and look at their signage and vice versa. You can help each other. And as I said earlier, signs are living documents. They are not to be put up and that's where they're going to live for the next 100 years. No, no, because what we're saying on our signs are not the message is not going to be there forever. They're going to constantly change as our policies change, as our directions change. All those messages they're not always going to be the same. And a good rule of thumb is if you see a sign in your library and it seems extraneous, like, why do we have that sign? And you're not sure why, or it seems silly, it probably is. And it's probably something you should think about taking down. So, and this is something that I think helps solidify something that you learn, is make a commitment today. So just take one or two of the ideas from this webinar, one or two that you agree with. You don't have to agree with all of them. That's fine. Take one or two that you like and implement that idea. Start small. Let's say you're going to go, okay, I'm going to look at all the signage in my library. That would be a fabulous one. And just be consistent in constantly looking at your signage on a regular basis. Just like your policies are looked at on an annual basis, you can look at your signage on an annual basis. I think a lot of times that people mess up, myself included, is when I go to a webinar or training and I've learned a lot of new ideas. I want to do everything at once, and then I do nothing because I am overwhelmed. So just take one or two ideas and do that. And then if you are able to do those consistently, then add the others that you are interested in. So that is what I have for you today on library signage. If you have any comments or questions, or, Shellie, you're insane, or maybe ideas for my next webinar on signage, because as I've been working on this webinar, I've become very passionate about signage. And I've always, when I go to libraries or even, Walmart or Target, I notice it all the time now. I'm really into it, and I really think it's very important, and it is how we navigate the world. But if you have any suggestions on how I can improve or add to this webinar, I would love to hear your comments. This is my contact information, and I would love to hear from you. And thank you for attending this webinar today.